The night was black as ink, the sea silent as death. On the dark water rocked 4,400 ships, lanterns dimmed, oars muffled. 150,000 men held their breath. Across the narrow strip of water, behind a low stone wall, 20,000 samurai waited with drawn swords. Tomorrow one side would own Japan. The other would feed the crabs, but before dawn breaks and blood flows, smash that subscribe button right now and ring the bell. Because this is the greatest invasion you've never heard the full story of, and the next 20,000 words are about to change everything you think you know. The year is 1281, the 7th year of the Koan era in Japan, the 18th year of the Yuan era under Kublai Khan, the largest invasion fleet in human history until D-Day is about to crash against the shores of Kyushu, and the fate of an entire civilization hangs on the edge of a katana blade. Let us begin long before the ships ever left harbor, when the world was still young and the name Genghis Khan was a nightmare whispered in every corner of Asia. In the wind-swept steppes north of the Great Wall, a boy named Temujin was born in 1162 with a blood clot in his fist, or so the story goes. By the time he took the title Genghis Khan in 1206, he had united the Mongol tribes into a single fist of iron. In less than 30 years, his horsemen thundered across the continent. They smashed the Jin Empire in northern China, rode west until they bathed their horses in the Caspian Sea, and left behind mountains of skulls that bleached white under foreign suns. When Genghis died in 1227, the empire was split among his sons. The northwestern quarter went to the Golden Horde, the Central Asian lands to Chagatai, Persia, and the Middle East to Hulagu and the eastern lands, including China. To the line of Tului, it was Tului's son Kublai, who would one day sit on the dragon throne in Dadu and dream of an ocean empire. Kublai was different from his grandfather. Where Genghis had lived in a yurt and died on campaign, Kublai built marble palaces, collected Chinese scholars, drank wine from golden cups, and read poetry under moonlit pavilions. Yet the blood of the steppes still boiled in him. By 1271, he declared himself emperor of the Yuan dynasty, the first foreigner to rule all of China. By 1279, the last Song emperor, a child of 9, leaped into the sea at the Battle of Yamen rather than surrender, and China was his. Only one kingdom in East Asia still flew its own flag free: Japan. Japan in the 13th century was a world apart. While Europe was mired in the Middle Ages, Japan had already developed a warrior culture of terrifying refinement. The samurai were not merely soldiers, they were a caste, a religion, a way of death. Their code was not yet written down as the famous Bushido of later centuries, but its bones were already there: absolute loyalty, contempt for death, and an honor so fierce that surrender was worse than any torture. Real power lay not with the divine emperor in Kyoto, who spent his days composing poetry and performing Shinto rites, but with the military government in Kamakura. The shogunate had been founded in 1192 by Minamoto no Yoritomo after the Genpei War. When Yoritomo died, his widow's family, the HJ, seized control as regents. By 1268, the regent was HJ Tokiori, but he retired to a monastery, passing the position to his 16-year-old son Tokimuni in 1268. Tokimuni was barely 20 when the first Mongol letter arrived. The letter came by Korean ship in the autumn of 1268. It was written in elegant Chinese, sealed with vermilion ink and the golden peza of the Great Khan. The language was courteous, almost humble. From ancient times, rulers of small states on distant borders have sought friendly relations with their neighbors. We beg that your majesty establish amicable ties with us. Should this not happen, armies will clash, and who in the world desires such sorrow? Translation: pay tribute or die. The Kyoto court panicked. Elderly nobles remembered horror stories of the Mongols burning entire cities, of pyramids of human heads. They urged the emperor to send gifts and polite acceptance, but the letter was forwarded to Kamakura, and Tokimun's answer was simple: he refused to reply at all. The Korean envoys waited months, then sailed home empty-handed. Kublai sent another embassy in 1269, then 1270, then 1271. Each time the answer was silence or insult. In 1272, the envoys were met at Hakata by armed samurai who escorted them back to their ships without allowing them to land. One Korean chronicle claims the Japanese tied the envoys to horses and dragged them through the streets. True or not, the message was clear. Kublai decided on scene war. He ordered the king of Goryeo, already a vassal, to build 1,000 warships. The king protested that Goryeo's forests could not supply the timber. Kublai sent 5,000 Mongol cavalry to discuss the matter. Within a year, the shipyards of Hapkian and Busan were working day and night. Trees sacred for centuries were felled. Rice farmers were taken from their fields to haul logs. By 1274, 900 ships were ready. Not the 1,000 demanded, but enough. The army assembled was a patchwork. 15,000 Mongol cavalry useless at sea but terrifying once ashore. 8,000 Korean auxiliaries, and 17,000 Chinese infantry and sailors. The supreme commander was a Mongol noble named Kublai Khan, with the Korean general Kim Bangjong as second. They sailed in early November 1274, winter storms already brewing. First stop, Tsushima Island, the stepping stone between Korea and Japan. The daimyo of Tsushima, S. Sukakuni, had 80 horsemen and perhaps 200 foot soldiers. He met the invaders on the beach at Komoda. Mongol arrows fell like hail. The samurai charged again and again, cutting their way to the Mongol standards before being overwhelmed. Sukakuni's daughter, a girl named Seoheim, is said to have stood on the cliffs waving a red banner until the last defender fell. The Mongols slaughtered every living thing on the island, then sailed on. Next came Iki Island. Same story. A few hundred defenders, a day of slaughter. Total annihilation. On November 19th, the fleet anchored in Hakata Bay. The bay is shallow, perfect for defense. The local samurai had torn down houses to build barricades. Behind them waited perhaps 5,000 warriors under the command of the Shoni and Tomo clans. The Mongols tried to land at several points. Wherever they touched, sure, samurai were waiting. The fighting was unlike anything the invaders had faced on the continent. In China and Korea, armies broke and ran when outflanked. Here men fought until they died where they stood. Mongol shock weapons, handheld bomb-like devices filled with gunpowder and iron shards, exploded among the samurai ranks, tearing men apart. Samurai had never seen gunpowder before. Some faltered, most did not. They closed the distance and turned the battle into a butcher's yard of swords. One famous incident, a Mongol officer named Liu Fuhong, wearing magnificent lamella armor, rode along the shore shouting orders. A samurai named Tokizaki Suinaga, we know his name because he paid a painter to record his deeds, galloped straight at him, leapt from his horse onto the Mongol S, and cut the man's head off before the bodyguards could react. By nightfall, the beach was littered with corpses. The Mongols had taken heavy losses and gained almost no ground. Their commanders feared night fighting. In darkness, the samurai's longswords ruled. They ordered retreat to the ships to regroup and attack again at dawn. As the last troops scrambled aboard, the sky turned black. A wind came out of nowhere, rising to a howl. Rain lashed sideways. Waves the height of houses smashed the anchored fleet against the cliffs of Hakata. This was no ordinary storm. Old Japanese records call it the wind that came from Ai's shrine, as though the sun goddess herself had intervened. Modern meteorologists believe it was an early typhoon, rare for November but not impossible. When morning came, half the fleet was gone. Ships lay broken on the rocks like toys. Bodies floated in armor, faces down. Of the original 40,000 invaders, perhaps 13,000 died in the storm. Another 5,000 were cut down when they staggered ashore. Fewer than 10,000 made it back to Korea. Kublai Khan received the news in his winter palace. He said nothing for a long time, then ordered the surviving generals executed for cowardice. Then he began planning a second greater invasion. 7 years passed. In those 7 years, Japan did not sleep. H.J. Tokimuni knew the Mongols would return. He prayed daily at the Zen temple he had built in Kamakura, seeking clarity. He ordered every coastal province to prepare. Farmers trained with bamboo spears after rice planting. Fishermen practiced archery on drifting targets. Priests prayed day and night at every shrine from Kyushu to Kyoto. Most importantly, Tokimuni built the wall. Along 20 kilometers of Hakata Bay, a stone and earth barrier 2 meters high was raised. Behind it, small forts and watchtowers. In front, wooden stakes driven into the shallows to rip the bottom out of landing boats. Across the sea, Kublai's preparations dwarfed the first attempt. He now ruled all of China. The shipyards of Chuanzhou and Ningbo worked without pause. Every private vessel on the coast was confiscated. Forests in Fujian were stripped bare. Korean shipwrights were worked until they dropped. By spring 1281, the new fleet numbered 4,400 ships. Some sources say as many as 5,000, carrying between 140,000 and 140,000 men. The army was split into two forces. The Eastern Route Army, 40,000 men under the Mongol general Shinbu, sailed from Hapkian in Korea with 900 ships. Their orders landed Hakata, pinned the Japanese in place. The Jiangnan army, 100,000 men under the Chinese general Fan Wenhu, sailed from Ningbo with 3,500 ships. They were to swing north and crush the Japanese from the rear. The plan looked perfect on parchment. It began to unravel almost immediately. The Eastern army reached Hakata Bay in late June. They found the stone wall, the stakes, and thousands of samurai waiting exactly where they were expected. For weeks, the Mongols tried to force a landing. Japanese small boats, fast vessels rowed by suicidal samurai, darted out at night, boarded anchored ships, set them on fire, and escaped into darkness. Hundreds of Mongol vessels were lost before they ever saw battle. By the time the Jiangnan army finally appeared on the horizon in early August, the Eastern army was exhausted, low on food, and still had no secure beachhead. The two fleets united off Takashima Island, 30 kilometers west of Hakata. The commanders held council aboard the flagship. They decided on one final, overwhelming assault. On August 15th, they would land every man at once and sweep the Japanese into the sea. The night of August 14th was unnaturally calm. Samurai on shore wrote their death poems by torchlight. One, a young warrior named Kusunoki Masashige, destined for greater fame later, wrote, "If I die on the battlefield, let my body fall forward, for I have no wish to return." On the Mongol ships, men sharpened sabers and checked arrows. Fan Wenhu drank himself to sleep, dreaming of glory. At dawn, the sky was clear. The invasion barges were lowered. Tens of thousands of oars bit the water. Then the wind shifted. It came from the southeast, slowly at first, then with growing fury. By noon, the sky was grit and black. Waves rose higher than the masts. The typhoon, the second Kamikaze, had arrived exactly when Japan needed it most. For 48 hours, the divine wind raged. Ships were driven hundreds of kilometers off course. Some were hurled all the way to Okinawa. Others were smashed against the cliffs of Takashima until the rocks were painted red. Men clung to floating wreckage only to be sucked under by the undertow. Korean and Chinese chronicles later wrote that the sea was so thick with corpses that birds could walk across it. When the storm finally passed, the invasion was over. Of the 4,400 ships, fewer than 500 limped home. Of the 150,000 men, perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 survived, many to be executed by Kublai for failure. On the beaches of Kyushu, H.J. Tokimuni walked alone among the wreckage. Broken Mongol banners lay trampled in the sand. Corpses of men who had crossed half a world to conquer his homeland floated gently in the surf. He knelt, pressed his forehead to the wet sand, and spoke 2 words: "Thank you." Japan had been saved not by numbers, not by strategy alone, but by the courage of its warriors and the mercy of the gods who sent the divine. When the name Kamikaze would sleep for 6.5 centuries until another generation of Japanese warriors flew one-way missions into Allied fleets believing the same gods would save them again. They did not. But that is another story. For now, the sun rose on a free Japan, the samurai's honor unbroken, the greatest invasion in medieval history shattered on the rocks of Takashima, and the legend of the divine wind was born.